All right, everyone. How are you doing? You know what time it is. It is 1 p.m. in Kitsap County. And you know it is the best hour of your week. It is tipping points and puzzle pieces. And we've got another great show for you today. Hopefully, everyone is staying hydrated and cool. Yes, the weather has dropped down a little bit, but you still need to be cognizant of that. And we're all about resiliency here. So we want to make sure that you are being resilient. However, we need to jump into this show. So you know that the true star, he's coming. He's coming up. What's his name? Maybe we need to refer to him as the acronym, right? MBF. Mark Boatwright Frost.
Hey.
All right, I think from now on you should be known as the acronym.
MBF. Yeah, the TLA.
TLA.
Three-letter acronym. So I told the story recently. I worked at Cisco Systems in California. And when I first got there, they gave me this inch-thick book that was like 5x7, all full of three-letter acronyms and what they really mean.
Oh, really?
So that I could understand people when they talked in meetings and we're all using TLAs to describe a thought or a concept or something. And I'm looking at them going, seriously? You think this is a good idea?
You know,
Yeah, hold on. I don't understand you. Let me look it up.
Well, at least they gave you a book. You know, when I was working for the Navy in 2 stints, right? You know, there's the military is acronym just super heavy. And most times they don't even bother, right? So they just, they just speak and you're like the little crickets are swirling around and you just try to catch on when you can and eventually you get it and you understand it. It is what it is, but yeah, it can be pretty brutal.
Yeah, I mean, if you're on the bridge doing a stint and you're like on a missile destroyer and you have this thing say DPB, what's that mean? As I lean on the button, it means don't push the button.
Is that what that means?
I don't know. I just made that up.
Oh. I wouldn't be surprised. I just wouldn't.
Yeah, no, I've seen some really ridiculous things. So today's subject is the winds of change. We're going to talk about tipping points. And
all right.
So I was planning to do a whole bunch of graphs from the things of changing, and I realized what I always seem to realize when I do any research, and especially when I'm doing research on Google trying to find something meaningful, is there's a lot of people doing a lot of graphs on stuff that is very compartmentalized. And so our whole thing's about perspective. For perspective, you have to step back a couple paces and look at a larger picture. I don't know why, but my background just kind of overlaid on top of you, and you look like you've got a halo with a lot of colors coming out of the top of your head. And your beard is
I'm gonna.
Your beard
I wanted the background you had, but didn't quite work out for me.
You have to have the green screen. But actually, that was really amusing. So anyway, they have all of these people like Gallup and Pew and all of the research companies doing all of these graphs on things about being a progressive, things about trends of change, but they all go really granular into things, mostly trying to disprove that it's useful at all. People writing articles about how the progressives are making horrible mistakes and they've got to learn from the 1920s when we had a progressive movement to the breaking it down into Gen X and Gen Z and millennials and all of these moving, waving lines that essentially say nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to do a little bit of creative dot connecting. So let's talk about how we see positive trends. First of all, a lot of the people who are commentating on YouTube, which I don't have a number of, are all showing positive trends, and there are a lot of people working for very positive things. I would say actually more from my experience than people doing negative things. Now, that is biased because I work very hard to eliminate things coming into my feeds on all my social media that are going to be extraordinarily negative or lead toward false information. But
Well, I'll tell you,
selecting.
do not venture into Twitter land because that is a cesspool.
Yeah, actually, though, they allow you to block a lot of stuff that keeps it fairly clean, but it means that you're going to get a very limited number of things in your feed, which is fine by me because I hardly ever use Twitter. But one of the things that just recently, and I want to do the caveat, we do not talk about politics on this program. Marwan and I stay completely away from that. We don't talk about Democrats. We don't talk about Republicans. We don't talk about things. But in some cases, things that are actually going on, when looked at from a little bit farther distance, are indicative of how change is happening in the country. Now, something that Bo came up with, and I've been actually reading and following, is they have some very restrictive um, um, abortion laws going on in North Carolina. And the populace of North Carolina, somewhere between 65 and 70%, oppose it. The legislature pushed the bill through. The Republican governor vetoed the bill, and they just voted to overturn it and put it in place anyhow. When 65 to 70% of the people in the country, in the state of North Carolina, don't want it.
Okay.
So that is indicative that the people are saying very clearly, we don't want the restrictions. Don't do this. And the legislature doing it anyhow. So this tells us two things. It tells us that there is a more progressive movement in the country towards social issues. And we're seeing the people that have been elected ignoring the will of the people to do what is on their agenda. So we're not going to explore that too much more, just as a point of fact that people are starting to see things in a more progressive way. And reproductive rights is one of the ways that a lot of people have seen in a more progressive way. Now, we won't talk about how that gets fixed or anything else like that, but there are a lot of instances for the last 5 to 7 years where we've started seeing more movement toward what we would term progressive in our populace, if not our government. We've seen people push for, we're seeing actually universal basic income experiments in the United States happening more and more frequently. We are seeing a movement in universities to start teaching a broader range of progressive ideas and with a historical perspective on that. We are hearing more and more about what happened in the 1920s with FDR and the New Deal and the progressive movement then, which happened after there was a huge financial crisis. So the winds of change, the people are embracing more and more what would normally be termed as progressive ideas in this country. But we aren't seeing them enacted because the institutions in place are not embracing them as quickly as the people in the country are. And this is normal. This is normal. Government does not change quickly. Matter of fact, I heard this a long time ago and I've repeated it. And someday I'm going to actually go out and find the statistics with it. But they say, it is said that when 75% of the people are on point to move in a different direction or in a direction, the government will jump out in front, hold up a flag, and say, "Look where we led you." And I think that's what we're seeing here. And while people are feeling hopeless, and God knows, Marwan, you and I have talked about really hopeless things and things that depress a lot of people on this program. We've talked about all kinds of stuff. And yeah, the shit's hitting the fan. But at the same time, there is a huge movement to address those differences. coming from the people. So we are seeing a clear example of we the people. Now this doesn't move in sitcom timeframes. We're seeing in the last 10 years a massive change in public attention to issues. Massive change. We are seeing elections changed by people, the polls being wrong because they don't count for unexpected voters. That would be the youth coming out and saying, oh no, we aren't doing this, and changing the way things go. We're watching states turn blue that were red, solidly red before, because people are changing their minds about what they will accept and what they will tolerate. So that's something that I kind of wanted to talk about today. It's just there's a trend toward really good things, but we don't see it because of the way we compartmentalize our reporting and our studies.
So how do we kind of remove the veil, if you will?
And how to quantify it? By doing what we do, but what you and I
Well,
do.
I guess I mean more in sense of there's definitely a lag between you know legacy media and how they are just so uh, staunch in not wanting to change, right, and not wanting to articulate what the people are thinking and feeling, right? If it bleeds, it leads is kind of their saying, but they really are designing the narrative that they're giving to us instead of giving us the narrative of what
Absolutely.
actually is.
Well, you have to ask yourself a question. Here's one of my perspective lessons. Ask yourself a question. What is the goal of traditional media?
Well, I would say it's programming, right? It's what do they call it? The fifth estate. It is supposed to be separate from our political structure as it is set, but I think it's been co-opted, for a while,
Who
which is
owns them?
unfortunate. Oh
Who
boy.
yeah, who owns the media? Rupert Murdoch owns Fox News. Well, which we can somewhat call media, but my opinion is they aren't really. But ABC, which is owned by Disney, ABC News is therefore owned by Disney. Um, by the way, I just heard a statistic that CNN is now lower viewership than some of the more outside cable news networks, like the more weird cable news networks. They are actually falling below even that in their statistics for
Wow.
watchers. Nobody
Wow.
trusts them much anymore.
Hmm.
But and they are owned by Turner, I think. Yeah, Turner News is who owns them. But which means technically they should be outside of the corporate owned media. Washington Post is owned by Jeff Bezos, which is Amazon.com. So when you think about news, and actually there's a really good example written by Aaron Sorkin, who did West Wing, called Newsroom on HBO. And they talk a lot about the constant battle between the need to make profit and the need to make news. And it shows a stark example um, of what it looks like when news is done well, and what it looks like when news is done poorly and doesn't provide context. It's a brilliant show. I
Hmm.
suggest people watch it. I am not using this as a factual statistic to what the news is, but it does kind of open up the thinking, and you can do some research to find out where things are. But news is about making money, and and therefore making money means that they have to have views, they have to have clicks. They've gone to a more social media type of mindset about how they do things, and therefore you see a blurb and you say, well, it's going to be a 1 day news cycle. Yeah, because they've got to come up with something else to keep us focused. If you want to find out something about what's going on in the Ukraine, you'll see a headline and some news, but it won't really go on to give it much more depth, because they're not interested in depth. They're interested in getting you to click, getting you to look, so that they can count you for their advertising dollars. So we don't have news that gives depth anymore.
And what's odd about that is you have, let's say, Bo, right? Or Breaking Points. There's a few that are on, social media on
Yeah,
YouTube and some of the other platforms that are actually having more views than some of the legacy media. And it's like, but so there is proof that having the other perspective and actually delivering
good
less
analysis
opinionated.
and more delivering context and analysis that are
Right, right.
viable.
Right, absolutely. So it's why are they hanging on to it? And it really just does the country a disservice.
Because they're by board of directors, they have shareholders, they have CEOs that are looking at stock prices, not actual delivery to the customer. And this can be said of all of industry, all of corporate industry. Is it's about shareholders, it's about the CEO being bonus on stock performance and not on the actual product to the customer, whether it's news, whether it's a widget, whether it's whatever. We have a very broken system, and that's part of what it is, and the information we're getting. We can talk about schools and everything else, but I don't want to really get into the dark side of things. But there's a huge movement to change the way we look at education, and I've talked to several educators recently, and they all kind of like go, yeah, this is all about corporations developing criteria and curriculum, and us having to teach that curriculum, and we're losing more and more of the creative things to focus on a very small teach to the test program. And it's hard to get kids to engage. Sir Kenneth Robinson talks about the lack of creativity in schools. And one of the things I draw a correlation to is it's great to have all the STEM programs, but what does STEM do? What good does STEM do you if you don't have the ability to be creative and innovate and use what you know to make things better? So creativity is vitally important in education. It's the way to engage you in thinking, to help you see other ways of looking at things. And I think that that needs to be reinstated immediately. And it's, again, a slow process. It's not going to change because there's a lot of money invested in schools to do exactly what they do.
So would you say, take education out of the private sector? Like what is your
No,
solution there?
I think that education should be public education, but I think it should be truly public education, not corporate sponsored education, because corporations are
Mm.
making billions of dollars on developing curriculum that no teacher has ever seen, and to tell a very small story. And you've told me stories about how curriculum does not cover the Black experience anywhere near like it should. And that's because it's not written by people who live that experience or really look at the history. And I think that history, like all history, needs to be taught in all of its full color, technicolor, juicy experience, because that way kids will understand history and be able to apply that history to our lives today.
Well, and not just history, but also, we have an explosion with technology and AI. And I think we're really doing our youth a disservice by not making sure that they are on the cutting edge of what they need to be viable when they become adults, right? I mean, this generation is, or what are they classifying this as, the lost generation, right now, with these young adults and these kids. And so what we see their issues, and so are we just going to repeat the same thing for the next generation, or are we going to get ahead of it and say, hey, these are the things that we're seeing: AI, automation, warehouse jobs. I mean, the layoffs are massive,
Mhm.
across the board, but it's taken out a lot of white collar jobs that folks didn't see coming. And so if you have people on this train track to go into this abyss of death in regards to careers, what are we going to be dealing with in 10, 15, 20 years?
Yeah, well, we're going to be dealing with a lot of things in 10, 15, 20 years. But right this minute, right now, we have a shortage of blue collar workers in this country. Huge and shocking shortage of blue collar workers in this country because we shoved everybody
Say it
into
again.
we've been sent everybody to the MBA programs to work at McDonald's because there aren't any jobs. But
Say it again, please.
we have what, the blue collar workers? We have an incredible shortage of blue collar workers in this country right now today. And let's see, Olympic College closed down its industrial teaching, what, 5 years ago? There were only 2 or 3 colleges in the Puget Sound area that teach industrial arts and enter into the apprenticeship programs of the unions, who in turn have done themselves a disservice by making it so difficult to get into the programs for so many years. And now they're screaming for people. The power companies need linemen to work on power poles. There is a tremendous shortage. Wastewater treatment plants. There are people who've been there 30 years that cannot retire because there's no one to replace them. No one's entering the internship program. These are good paying jobs.
Mhm.
Granted, you're going to get your hands dirty, but you're going to be making, $60,000, $70,000 going in. And the people who are working in these plants are making 6 figures because they've been there so long and they cannot leave. They'd like to retire.
Yeah, that's a scary thought.
Yeah.
So,
It's a really shitty job, but it pays well. So,
yeah.
wastewater
Well, I
treatment.
mean, if they're getting older,
Yeah,
if they could pass away, then what do you do if you have no one to fill that position?
exactly so.
Sitting in the wings.
And those are not the only 2 jobs. Auto mechanics. If there's a job you can't offshore, you can't send your car to Japan or China to get it fixed and come back. It's got to be done here. There are a lot of jobs here that are a great shortage for them, and fewer people teaching you the skills you need to have to do them. Plumbers. Right now, they came even after COVID. Plumbers are like a 3 to 6 week wait to get a plumber.
Mm-hmm.
Developments are slowed down because there's nobody capable of building them because there just aren't the builders around. There are installers like I went to Best Buy and I talked to them about what it would take to install a new radio in my car that would allow me to have Bluetooth and hands free capabilities. And they said, well, it'll be 7 or 8 weeks before we could get to it.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And yet everyone's screaming about, we can't find anybody. And there's all these people that left their work over COVID or got laid off or just quietly were pushed out the door, however you want to say it. And they aren't coming back to work because they can't work for no money. And with prices of rent going up and, as I said, the HUD number that is being used or had been used in the past by some of the agencies here said that the average income in Kitsap County is $104,000 a year for a family of 4. I don't know about you, but I don't know anybody making $104,000 a year that isn't working at the shipyard, and they are only a fraction of the populace of Kitsap County. So where does that general number come from? And where's the $104,000 coming from, and why is that the average mean when it obviously isn't here?
Well, clearly people are living on less. Have you thought about what we can do in this what do you call it, revolution to change this, right? So follow what I'm saying, right? So UBI has big talk right now. It seems to wane and come back, and it's like, oh, we're not gonna stop or stall or reverse housing prices. Everything is just becoming more expensive. So we're not going to do something really radical and say, hey, you know what, we are going to roll these things back, or we're going to say you're not going to be able to have a capitalistic viewpoint on basic needs like housing and health and things like that. I think that's the answer. But what can we do short of that to fix the situation?
Well, fixing it quickly isn't going to happen any way you look at it. And part of the issue is what we talked about earlier is that media is putting out a very specific viewpoint that benefits them, but not anybody else. And I've noticed something recently driving around for G2 that I see a lot of available rental spaces here in the county. I'm seeing more and more over the last month or two, and yet we have this housing shortage, and we're building all these McMansions everywhere, and yet there's a fair amount of housing in fairly reasonable areas. And I'm like going,
You,
well,
you
that's really interesting, huh?
Are you doing commercial buildings?
I still miss you. Broke up a little bit on that one.
Are you talking about commercial property?
No, I'm talking about apartments.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Um, there's some apartments down off of Naval Avenue, right where you get down to the water. There's condos that are looking to lease it for people. There are apartment buildings there. As I drive by places, I look at the signs to see if there are vacancies, and there are vacancies in a lot of places right now. So I'm like going, interesting. You know, everyone's saying about the shortage of housing, yet I'm seeing a lot of vacancies, and I'm seeing a lot of for
Well,
rent signs in on houses.
and it could be because folks can't afford it.
It's possible. I know one of the places I looked at is actually fairly reasonable, but they're limited because they're one bedroom apartments. So you know you've got
But
a
what's
fairly.
fairly reasonable?
Um, from what I understand about this place, it's 20% lower than what they would call um, market rate around here right now.
And so what is that? Just for, folks that don't know
A
what
thousand to $1,200 as opposed to
for a one bedroom?
for one bedroom as opposed to 1,600 or more.
Right, but it's like, well, it could be 1,600, it's 1,000, so that's pretty good. Like, we used to pay $700 for a one-bedroom apartment,
No, I
you
agree.
know?
I agree with you. But this one actually, to be fair, this one has a water view. I know, but that they rate up higher for that. I have water view too.
So,
All I have to do is set a bath. Um,
go ahead and wall up my window if I can, pay $700 a month. Yes, I get it.
yeah,
Yes,
but there are,
water view.
but knowing that there are vacancies and not buying into the nonsense about the housing shortage that everyone keeps spewing as they develop the hell out of everything, may make you understand that it's being rigged, and
Well, I think what it is, Mark,
and you
is
can drive change in. I'm sorry, what?
there is a housing shortage. What it is, it's a shortage on affordable housing,
Yes,
right? That's what it is. I think the terminology is not in sync.
right.
And that's why scaffolding to we have to be on the same level as we have conversations with each other. So like you said, yeah, there's a lot of stock out on the market, but it's not affordable for people to get in.
Especially people who live and work and want to live in the place where they work in Kitsap County. And again, it goes back to lack of information and lack of we the people being able to push it. Because you asked how to fix it, we the people coming together can fix it. If 5,000 people went down to the city council meeting and said we need affordable housing or you guys won't be in your seats anymore, and 5,000 people can make that happen, then
I disagree.
things might be changing.
I absolutely disagree
Okay.
with that. And here's the reason why. A lot of our housing prices are set by external forces. So when HUD comes down, or the military, which is a big one, has their housing allowance, right? And they say, hey, their housing allowance is set at this. Then, as a resident, right, or a homeowner, I'm gonna set, or a multi-unit owner, I'm gonna set my rent higher because that's what this is what the market demand, right? This is capitalism. So you can have half of the city go down to city council and say, "Hey, we need to do something about this," but those exterior factors are going to drive the rent up.
Yes, to some degree, but the other side of it is you can also change the focus of the city council to start working on real affordable housing and working on setting the guidelines and the rules for at least certain areas where you can have affordable housing in that area, and and developers would have to meet those to build there. Now, maybe no developer will want to do it. That's a possibility, and we'd have to find a
Yeah,
different way.
why would I want to give profit back?
Yeah, well, the profit is in the long term. The developer only gets the money for the actual building of the property and selling of the property. You don't think so? Go for it.
I'm just saying, you're not going to get anyone to come in and build for that, right? And you're not going to get someone to come in and invest and say, hey, The city has said it's like the same incentive for having Amazon, move into a town, and you've got these bidding wars for different cities, right? And it just drives it up. We're going to give you this. We're going to give you that. We're going to give you a tax break for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, right? Um, and unless we put a hard line on that and say no more, we're not going to do that. Uh, you're just not going to have folks do it. I think the solution is turning insular and saying, hey, you know what? If we're really going to truly be resilient, we have a lot of folks that don't have a livable wage, don't have a family wage, don't have skills. We have a bunch of gaps vocationally. Why don't we just go ahead and train and teach our own citizens that live right here in Kitsap? We have Olympic College that has welding and a lot of other really great programs,
Do they
manufacturing down in the yard,
do they have that back?
CNC.
Does Olympic have that back? Because they closed those programs down a few years ago.
No, 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 no. Those things are still there. The
Okay.
shipyard programs are still there, right?
Okay.
So you build it insularly, internally, and you say, you know what? Here's what we'll do. We've got the company you love, Habitat for Humanity,
Hmm.
and we're going to do Habitat for Humanity on steroids. And we're
And
going to
what?
say, okay, we're
And
not
there's another one called Housing Kitsap now.
Housing Kitsap, but
Yeah.
even Habitat, I think is a lot of people know what that one is. But okay,
Right.
so there's Housing Kitsap, and I don't know much on how they work.
They do.
But
They do
you
what
know,
you're talking about. They train people how to build their own houses.
right, but you don't stop once you build yours. You
Right.
continue to help others build theirs, and you continue it on, right? So now we don't need to outsource some, developer out in California or overseas and have to give all these tax breaks in order for them to come and build. We're going to build here. And so now all we really have is the cost of materials, right? We're giving folks the skills, we're giving them a livable wage that's based on here, which drives prices down, right? Now we're also teaching people to go into different professions. So now we've created some plumbers, we've created some electricians, we've created some framers that can work here in the area and or work in neighboring counties. I think
Providing
that
and providing the manpower that is necessary to developments. Down the way from where I live, we have that affordable housing complex that's been in process for 5 years now on Riddell and Almira.
Oh yes, yes.
And it's still not done. And by the way, having done construction, and you've done way more than I have, I have to ask the question: every construction project I've ever been on, you put the roads in first, and then you build the houses. This is the only one I've ever seen where they built all the apartments, and now they're starting to put the roads in. But this has been going on an ungodly long time. These units should have been done a year ago, but they don't ever seem to have the manpower on it. So I'm wondering if part of the economic drive of the development is the McMansions are going up because you can pull more people and pay higher wages to do high-end housing or high-end apartments and multi units, but the affordable housing you can't get anybody to finish it up. And there's a lot of projects I've seen going on in Kitsap that are going way slower than I would expect them to go.
Well, some of that has, COVID had a big effect on that,
Yeah.
right? And not only with our supply chain, which I think was one of the biggest issues that we had, right? So it drove our material costs through the roof. And so then there's this huge delay. And then you have all these folks, right? And so you're going to lose, if you don't have any work for your workers, you're going to lose your workforce. They're going to go to other places, right? And so now we go from one project to the next project to the next project. And now all these things are in limbo because we don't have wood and we don't have cement or we don't have, steel, whatever the case may be, or the price is so high, we're having to slow down. So I think all these factors all at once we're coming out of the end of COVID, but we're going to be experiencing the impact of COVID
For a long time.
for at least a good decade. It's going to
Yeah.
be a minute.
And that brings back the thought about why didn't they put the roads down first? Maybe they couldn't get the materials for the roads or couldn't get the equipment to put the roads in first.
And someone made a decision, hey, let's we've got this labor, we could do this part or we could do that part, so let's do this. So that could be what that is.
Yeah.
Um
And I say I'm not an
and
expert on it, but it's just something I'm used to seeing them do that first and then everything else.
Well, and everything has a process. So, I was just it's so funny we're having all these conversations that's triggering I had to annotate all of my previous experiences while I lived in Kitsap for something that I did yesterday. But in that, you're kind of bringing up these different things, acronyms and construction and whatnot. And so, being a brick mason, you have to come in at a certain time and do the work, right? And so until these other folks get done, you've got to wait. And then the
Yeah.
electricians have to come in, the plumbers have to come in. So they can't do anything until this is done. Well, we can't do this until that's done. And then this has to set. So all of these things are on these tight controls and order. And if one person is out of order in that, and there's only so much you can do. So you're
Yeah.
just waiting.
Actually, there was a really high end house. I knew somebody who worked in a painting, local high end painting contractor, and there was a really high end house in Bainbridge Island they were working on, and they had to, and for some reason they put the carpet in before they allowed the painters in.
What?
You got exactly what I was talking about. Like, yeah, no, just no. Do the paint first, and then you do the carpets. Otherwise, you're going to be doing rework.
Well, and you're gonna have to tape everything off, right? Which
Yeah,
is more materials, more time. But there could have been something in place where it's like, look, man, we can't get the painters out here. We'll just put this in. By the time they're gonna get there, we don't have the 4 days it's gonna take to lay the carpet. I'm just using
yeah,
that arbitrary number to do that. So let's get this out the way. Yes, they'll have to, take some time and tape everything down, but whatever. Or maybe after the carpet's down, they can tape while we're still waiting on the rest of their crew to come over. I mean, there's all kinds of crazy things
yeah.
like that that kind of put things out of whack.
But in the best laid plans of mice and men, the carpet does not go in before the paint is done. Just it's kind of like, yeah, I'm going to put the carpet in, then I'm going to put the roof on, and then I'm going to put the ceiling down. No, no, no.
Yeah,
Just
put the
no.
carpet in and there's no roof. Hey, we're gonna get rain for the next 3 weeks, but it should be okay, right? We'll put some fans in there and just dry that out.
But the point is, there are ways that things go in order because it makes more sense. Which
Yes.
means going back to your idea, I think that's an excellent idea. I was actually reading about Housing Kitsap and what they're doing. Though quite honestly, it's like many other things. I'm not sure after reading their website what exactly they do, but they have some floor plans and they supposedly teach people how to do this stuff and put all of that together, which I think is a great idea. Um, but then you go back to the first question that came up to my mind, and it's one I have for Habitat for Humanity, is where did they get the land to build on? And then there's the whole infrastructure piece of power running to it, water running to it, internet cable running to it. That's a lot of money and a lot of time to set up for an area. And I know they do it. I just don't know how they do it. And so when I try and think my way through it, I just don't have enough information to understand it. But that's part of the issue that we could go down and talk about, especially to the city or county. They may have land that we could do affordable housing on, and we could go that way to get land available to do that with. But that's just an idea, and it's very, very unpainted canvas at the moment, but it's kind of an idea for ways we can find places to do affordable housing that would work for the model that you're representing. I think that's an excellent model.
And really, like, truly affordable housing.
Yes.
In some ways, you know, we're not being political here, but if we're intellectually honest, right? There are good things about today. There's bad things about today. There's good things about the past. There's bad things. You know what I'm saying? So if you say make America great again, there were some good things back then, right? The price of a gallon of gas, the price for a gallon, for a
Mhm.
loaf of bread. We can be nuanced in our discussion and say, hey, can we go back to housing prices to where, you know, a family could actually retire at retirement age, right? And enjoy the rest of their life. Could they, could a new family or an individual now, because we're just at a different time, there's not a necessity for, young adults to marry and start a family immediately, right? women are going to college and doing their careers and doing things like that. So, from a societal standpoint, we're a little bit different now. So individually, how can those folks, get into the housing market and buy their first home or their starter home where they are not rent burdened, and they also have an investment that they can leverage as they kind of move on, but not allowing these prices to triple and over the course of
You
of
know,
the of,
it goes back to the same thing I've said all the way along. It's mindset, to some
Mhm.
degree. Part of what's driving the prices up are people with the mindset that this is an investment for our retirement. And my sister and brother-in-law were classically this way. They bought and sold homes and bought and sold homes and bought and sold homes so they could edge their way up to a greater. And what they were really doing is going in deeper and deeper in debt. And they had this view of what their retirement was going to look like, so they could retire in the lifestyles of the rich and famous or whatever. And then this little hiccup happened, and I'm going to say this before I tell the rest of the story. So people have asked me for a long time, what clean technology company should I or technology should I invest in? What company should I buy stock in? And I tell them, take your money, go to Las Vegas and play blackjack. You've got better odds.
Mm.
And the reason I say that is because there are so many factors in the profitability of a company that you cannot manage or control for, that it is a complete gamble to play the stock market, as far as I'm concerned, unless you understand the nuances or have inside information. A lot of it is just going to be stable, but you're not going to get rich unless you take risks, and the risks are the places that are going to kill you. So this goes back to the story of my sister and brother-in-law. We're investing, to get more and more money for a larger investment for a greater retirement. By the way, they're living their lives doing things they hate in order to get there. So let's go back to that point in just a moment. And they invested in this company called Enron that was doing really, really, really well. And then they lost 50% of their investment, 50% of their retirement, and set them back a lot. They always hated me for having my dour view of the stock market and their whole game of upgrading and upgrading and upgrading. They thought that I was communist or socialist or something like that. I said, no, I'm just risk averse. And this is just another example of you're betting on something that you have no control over and you can't possibly know what's going to happen.
Mhm.
So this is our society, and part of what drives housing prices up is people doing this as an investment instead of a place to live. And what I think we need to do is go back to a place where your home is your place you live. It's not some place that you're going to invest or roll or everything else. But that's the mindset in this country. That's another way to use the property to make more and more money.
Well, and I think
Hey,
that
Kendra.
I think that's going to be the hard one to do, is to say, hey, where do we draw the line and say, okay, well, yes, this was a profit making expedition for a lot of folks, and a lot of people made out like bandits, but now we're going to stop it, and no longer can you do that, right? You're going to have a revolt from those that continue to make profit off of that. You're going to have a revolt from those that are just entering into it, and then also from those that are that's hanging as that carrot of, if I could just get there, I too will have this financial freedom and
Yeah, and
be
I
able
don't.
to
I'd
live
love
a
to know what the percentile of the people who actually make it doing that are, and I would bet that it's a pretty small percentile. Yet the carrot is always there, and people continue to try.
yes. And that's part of it, right? It's a minority of people, right? There's what, the 1%. We're all jockeying under the guise and the dream Powerball, right? Mega Millions, to get into that 1%. That's the incentive.
Yep, and the likelihood of that happening is enormously small, but people don't do math well, so that's just kind of how that works. I want to go back to the lifestyles of the rich and famous versus how we live, really. And I mentioned that my sister and brother-in-law worked at things they didn't like to try and attain this. We all do that to some degree. You and I are lucky to a great degree because we're doing things that are passionate about. But for most of my life, I didn't. And I can't tell you how many mornings I woke up. Virtually every morning I woke up and why am I doing this? Why am I going? What am I getting out of this grind of going to work and doing this thing that I don't like, that makes no sense to me and doesn't have an output that makes any sense? Why am I doing it?
You know, I've been thinking about that, and I think it's really difficult to. I have my purpose, right? I know what my job is, and I that motivates me. I wake up every day, and it's like, let's go. It's another day. Let's get it done. There's things to do, and I love what I do, right? So that works for me. But for other people, right, the financial security is more important for them, right? So for me, I that's just not as important to me. That's not my driving factor. So it's hard to, get people to say, hey, you know what, if you can change your perspective on things, then you'll probably be more satisfied with life, even though you may have less. But actually, you probably have more because you may not be putting value in things that have no
Inherent
actual
value.
tangible value.
Yeah. That's like,
But that's different
yeah.
because they have been raised by their parents, their grandparents. This is generational, right?
Yep.
This is what you do. This is the measure of success. This is the measure of happiness. We're bombarded through marketing and advertising, right? So to undo that,
Back to
to,
media
to
again,
break
selling us an idea.
is tremendously difficult.
Yep. It is, but that's where we have to go if we want to survive.
No, I agree with you. The how,
Well,
because if someone asked me, Mark, what was it for you? What was that catalyst? There was a time when I was very self-centered. I would say definitely selfish, self-absorbed. When I was a brick mason, I was in my 20s. I was in the best shape of my life. I was making more money bricklaying than I was with a master's degree teaching at Olympic College. And this we're talking about a 20-year gap, right?
mm-hmm.
And it was all about me. I didn't care about these, social issues on housing and race and whatnot. Some of those things impacted me. Some of them didn't, right? But it was all about MC, at that point in time. And so my experience was definitely different. So if someone were to say, well, what changed in that? Was it almost being murdered, 3 days before your 21st birthday and having to reinvent yourself? And not being able to make money with your body, but having to do it with your mind and having to go to school.
Hold on.
Even
Let's
though I
go
had a
back
ninth
to the
grade
making money with your body thing. That could be taken so many ways.
Well, that will be on the night show.
Yeah. So you have another channel for that, right?
Yeah, I have another channel for that. That'll be at 11 p.m.
Yeah, go to
But
porn.
but
Go
even
to
then, actually,
yeah. Go
I
to
was gonna
porn.
say
Go to
that
Pornhub.
is actually. Well, you know what? If I had Pornhub back then, I probably would have been on it. But there was a time where I did have to use my body to survive in that way, right? They call them homosexuals, right? And it can be hard for males
Well,
in this world, right? Because there's not a lot of resources if you don't have family and children. And
yep.
so, yes, I had to be able to perform in order to keep a roof over my head from time to time, in my late teens and my early 20s.
Yeah. Well, as we both know, I've been perfect all my entire life, and I've always been driven to help other people. And I'm going to stop shoveling bullshit right now. You don't get to be where Marwan and I are without shoveling a lot of shit. You have things happen in your life, and you have to overcome them. If you don't survive. It's just that simple. So
That's the resiliency.
yeah, and you get to a place where you realize it's not about you. It can't be about you. It has to be about everybody else. And you understand suddenly, without a shadow of a doubt, that unless we survive together, we will not survive. Unless we thrive together, we cannot thrive. And that's the point. Marwan was talking earlier about, and I know we're closing up on the program, so I wanted to bring this in. Marwan was talking earlier about an idea of training people to build their own houses and figuring out how all those pieces go together. Well, one of the things we're doing in the project is we are helping people conceptualize the idea of a community garden in their neighborhood, which sets a foundation of working together, provides food security, provides nutritional greater nutritional security, helps people with their salaries and make their money go further, and it creates a network, a bonding network in the neighborhood that helps people work together, and everyone benefits from it. That is a step in the direction of learning how to make the changes we need to make. That's why we do it. It's a small step that has a big impact and can have a much larger impact going down the line. As you know, we talk about this every week on Saturday, every Saturday at 12:30 till 2 o'clock at the Kitsap Regional Library, and sometimes at G2, which we did last week. We hold a workshop. Our workshops have become very successful, and we are about ready to launch into the 2 through 12 package for 10 people that have been engaged in it or committed to doing it. This is where
Nice.
we start building out. This is where we start helping the change the perspective so we can change our next steps into the future. But understand, this is generational work. This isn't a sitcom. This isn't a drama on TV. This isn't a news podcast with a 1 day cycle. This is a seed that we are planting that Marwan and I will never sit under the tree that blooms from it. It takes time, but it's the time we have to invest now so that we have a future.
I feel like Moses.
Yeah, my 10 commandments. Yeah,
I would say, to that end, networking really should be the word of the day for you. It is tremendously important, and I'll give my anecdotal experience. Last year I wanted to grow in the garden for me and Layla. And Layla goes on vacation every summer to visit with the family down south. Well, it didn't happen. And even though the library had their summer reading program and all the resources are there, it just didn't happen. This year, like, okay, I'm gonna try to do it again. And so the networking piece is really important on that. Well, I met Deanne from the county, and she's working on her master grow license, and she grows. And so she's gonna help me to plant some kale in my backyard and some potatoes, right? So I've got Rob who's gonna build some raised planter beds for me, and I just spoke with Dan yesterday, so shout out to her. And she's telling me what type of soil to get, and she just found some new techniques on how to grow potatoes in a harsher climate, which I don't have a lot of sun in the backyard, and it's not ideal, right? I don't have acreage or anything like that. And I told her, I have a brown thumb, literally and figuratively, and so she's gonna help, make it Marwan proof so that I can grow. And so the two things I'm going to grow is kale and potatoes. I love potatoes, great staple. And, kale is really healthy. It's also really resilient. And so those are going to be the two things that we're going to work on. So, but that all came from networking and getting out of your comfort zone. Now, naturally, I meet a lot of people just in what it is that I do. But if you come to the workshops, you don't know who you're going to meet. You don't know what their, proverbial puzzle piece is, right? That gap that can help you to do something that you've been wanting to do, but you just don't know how, and you just think you're too busy or whatever the case may be. There's great people all around us, and so I encourage you to really, try the workshops out because you'll get a lot out of it. And the relationships is the most important piece of it.
yeah, absolutely. And the whole point of this is how to build relationships further than the workshop and how to continue networking until we build the grassroots network we need to change the things that are problematic within our culture so we can secure shelter, food, power, water. And we're working on that diligently all the time. We have a new board member, Matthew Barrett, who is a solar guy, and he's working very hard moving the Power for All project together. And the community gardens are one piece of the Food for All project we're pushing. I did want
I'm
to.
hoping to get you on to have a conversation around that because I would love to see how can renters take advantage of solar technology.
We're actually having some deep discussions about that. We'll cover some of that at the next board meeting. So we'll talk about that, and then we
Okay.
will start having more meetings this summer. I'm probably going to be more outbound than I'm comfortable with because of the amount of work that I do. Um, and also to add one more thing to my plate that has been on now. Um, right here, you see Thoughts for a Human Future on the Resiliency Rocks channel. I'm doing 6 to 10 minute blurbs on one subject. People who come here, they hear us go. We model the program of Marwan and I talking, and we don't agree on things, but we respect each other and we listen to each other, and we come to a different point of view. That's what this show is. It's to show to talk about the subjects to get people awake. But it's like on the Thoughts for a Human Future, I talk 6 minutes. Actually, it was 7 minutes and 15 seconds on tipping points and what tipping points are about. I talk 6 minutes on puzzle pieces. I talk 6 minutes on this. And then there's the 18-minute one that I just finished filming this morning with Dr. Jay Silverstein, who talks about neo-Darwinism and how our adoption of the theory provided by Darwin has actually prevented us from becoming better humans ourselves.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So I invited him to join us when he gets back from Egypt. He's leaving. The reason I had to pre-record it is he's leaving for Egypt for a dig for 3 months, and he will be back in late July sometime, I think. And I would like him to come on the program and talk to us about
Excellent.
it. So
I love it. I love it. I guess my only thing that I want to say, in the essence of full disclosure, I am running for city council. I have officially submitted that paperwork yesterday. We do try to not touch on politics here, and so you won't hear me advertise or talk about that on this platform at all. But if questions do come up, I do intend to be one that answers questions and does not dodge. I may say I need some time to think about it, but I think if we're also going to have change, just as we do things as a people, allowing people to dodge questions and not ask the question that was give an answer to the
good
question that
question.
was asked is disingenuous, it's dishonest, and it doesn't help anything.
Nope.
So do know that I don't see any conflicts in things that we say. I can be critical of city council as I will be, and I can also be give them their kudos when I think they have done something well. So that will continue, but I do want to just put that out there as
Yep.
full disclosure.
Oh, no worries. I was just checking to see if I was any blood on my lip from biting my lip. There's so many things I could say, not about you or you're running for city council, but some of the things you say about dodging question. I'm thinking, is he talking about?
Do I dodge questions?
No,
Am I a question dodger?
no. You
No.
are not. But I was thinking you were thinking you had a particular person in mind, and so I was like biting my
I
lip.
got a lot of people in mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
All right, so we are at 1 minute. So Marwan, I usually take the final statement. Let's let why don't you take it today?
All right. I'm just going to double down on networking. Networking is critically important, especially this time now. If you were looking at society and you were seeing people fighting on airplanes, fighting on restaurants, acts of violence that are just make no sense at all. Someone turning around in the driveway, cheerleaders getting in the wrong car. The recent one, kids playing hide and seek and another person in a man's yard and he shot one of the girls. There's all kinds of craziness that's going on. If you want to combat that and you're like, what do I do? You don't need to protest. You don't need to do any of that. You just need to meet your neighbors and build relationship. That is the fastest, most sustainable and resilient way to make long-lasting change and change how we are as a people. It really is we are the people. It sounds really cliche, but it starts there. It's going to end there. And if we just engage in networking, getting to know our neighbors, finding that common ground and building from that, this thing really can change in the immediate. We could change this in a generation or less if we do that.
Amen.
Amen.
So, and that's why the workshops exist, is to teach you how
Mhm.
to do the things you're uncomfortable with in meeting people and overcoming their cultural resistance that we get blasted through our media.
Yeah, and it takes practice. You know, I wasn't well versed in this, right? I'm to a point now where it's like, don't even tell me the topic, right? I can feel comfortable in who I am and what I know and what I don't know. That I can give my opinion, I can give fact, and I can say when I don't know. And that's a powerful thing to say. Hey, I don't know, I don't know, but I'm here and I'm willing. So engage. You know, it'll number one, it'll change your life. All right, and with that, we're gonna go ahead and conclude our show
Yep.
as, the sorry there, I just lost my screen because I was already in the Zoom
With
for the Kitsap
me.
Housing and Homeless
Have the
Coalition.
slide up.
Unfortunately, I cannot can I mute that? I don't have a way to mute that, so we're
Okay.
gonna go ahead and end here.
Okay.
Join us over on the other channel so that you
No
can
problem. Thank
get
you,
the Kitsap
Priya.
Housing and Homeless Coalition
Okay,
meeting.
I'm
For Mark
gonna
Boatwright Frost,
welcome
I'm
everyone
Marwan
as we
Cameron.
onboard
This
and
is
let
Tipping
everybody
Points and
into the
Puzzle Pieces.
meeting.
This is the Conduit. We'll
Go
see you
ahead
next
and
time, everyone.
start populating